In pursuit of the right to self-determination, Palestinian people use force to resist foreign oppression and complete the establishment of an independent state is inalienable right, well founded in international law. Various people freed themselves from colonial rule and foreign oppression to realize independent statehood after World War II. Their practices serve as convincing evidence for the right. Numerous Hague resolutions recognize legitimacy of struggling by all available means, including armed struggle by peoples under colonial domination or foreign occupation, to realize the right to self-determination. For instance, the Hague Resolution 3070 of 1973, I quote, reaffirms the legitimacy of the people's struggle for liberation from colonial and foreign domination and alien subjugation by all available means, including armed struggle, end of quote. This recognition is also reflected in international conventions. For example, the Arab Convention for Suppressing of Terrorism of 1998 affirms, I quote, the right of peoples to combat foreign occupation, aggression by whatever means, including armed struggle, in order to liberate their territories and secure the right to self-determination and independence, end of quote. Armed struggle in this context is distinguished from acts of terrorism. It is grounded in the international law. This distinction is acknowledged by several international conventions. For example, Article 3 of the OAU Convention on the Prevention and Combating the Terrorism of 1999 provides that, I quote, the struggle waged by peoples in accordance with the principle of international law for their liberation of self-determination, including armed struggle, against colonialism, occupation, aggression, and domination by foreign forces, shall not be considered as terrorist acts. It should be emphasized that the use of force by any entity or individual in the name of exercising the right to self-determination outside the context of colonial domination or foreign occupation is not legitimate. Meanwhile, during legitimate armed struggle by peoples, all parties are obliged to comply with IHL, and in particular, refrain from committing acts of terrorism in violation of IHL. Against the backdrop of the OPT, well-documented and widely recognized facts indicate that Israel's oppression policies and practices throughout its prolonged occupation of Palestinian territory have severely undermined and impeded the exercise and full realization of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. Mr. President, now I will move on to the issue of international law relating to the occupation. In China's view, the question of OPT involves both legality of occupation per se and the legality of Israel's act during the occupation. These two aspects are governed by distinct legal frameworks. The former falls under jus ad bellum, while the latter is mainly regulated by ICJ. Within the framework of jus ad bellum, the principle and exceptions are established by the UN Charter and customary international law. The principle of non-use of force is at the core of jus ad bellum. As corollary of this principle, the prohibition on acquisition of territory by force is firmly established in customary international law. Using force to occupy and maintain such occupation for the purposes of territory acquisition or annexing an occupied territory by force in whole or in part is each illegal. They are confirmed by the Friendly Relations Declaration of 1970, the definition of aggression of 1974, and the War Advisory Opinion. Israel's occupation has been explicitly recognized as unlawful by several UN resolutions. Following Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories in 1967, of the Security Council adopted resolutions 242 that, I quote, emphasizes the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war. Similarly, multiple UNGA resolutions affirmed the illegality of Israel's occupation. In addition to the use of force by peoples under colonial domination or foreign occupation in the exercise of their right to self-determination, the UN Charter provides for two exceptions to the principle of non-use of force, namely, the use of force authorized by the Security Council under Chapter 7 and the right of self-defense under Article 51. The exercise of the right to self-defense as an inherent right of states is contingent upon the occurrence of the armed attack against territorial sovereignty of a state. When can an occupying power invoke the right of self-defense? It hinges on whether the armed attack occurs in the occupied territory or within its own territory. In the occupied territory, the right of occupying power to self-defense depends on the legitimacy of the occupation per se. If occupation is unlawful, the occupying power can neither acquire territorial sovereignty nor resort to self-defense against armed attack that occurred in the occupied territory. This is rooted in the legal maxim, I quote, "No one can take advantage of his own wrong," end of quote. However, this does not rule out the possibility for the occupied power, based on temporary administration as a last resort, to take necessary forcible law enforcement measures against individuals or entity in the occupied territory. Nor does it preclude the use of force by occupying power against the combatants and military targets in accordance with jus in bello. These acts must stay within the limits set by international law. Within their own territory, an occupying power is entitled to self-defense against an armed attack. However, the exercise of this right is subject to various principles including necessity and proportionality, as reflected in customary international law. Under the framework of ICJ, the legality of not of the occupying per se will not affect the application of ICJ in the occupied territory. The armed conflict in which oppressed peoples struggle against colonial domination or foreign occupation in the exercise of the right to self-determination